Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining me for this week's edition of the SMIE Consulting Midweek Roundup. It's Wednesday, June 3rd, 2026, and today we're coming to you live from the home office in our Post-NAFSA glow with all the action items and follow-up plans that we needed to implement after last week's conference in Orlando. We'll have more on our feedback on that conference a little bit later on in today's episode. But as we do each week on the Roundup, we ask three questions today that come from our newsletter that comes out on Mondays, and that newsletter is called All the SMIE News Fit to Share. It's available on our website, which is bookmarked at the top of our Facebook page for SMIE consulting.org/subscribe. And that newsletter is available on that page to subscribe in both an email version and a LinkedIn version. Between the two of those, we have almost 3,200 subscribers now. So very proud to be coming to you and humbled to so many of my international education colleagues. And thank you for those of you who I met last week who I've never had the opportunity to connect with in person, that you commented about the Roundup, commented about the newsletter, and how important it was in your understanding of what happens in international education each week. So thank you for that. Truly means the world to me to know that the content that I'm putting out every week is being seen, is being understood, and implemented by colleagues around the world. So thank you so much for that. And with that newsletter, I will say that we do have four main sections: a social media section, which can cover everything from how social media is being used in international education, to new digital reports on student trends, to upcoming webinars that are going to be useful, to anything that might be AI related or digital related that impacts what we do in international education. That's the first section. We have a US section that has the kinds of news stories about big news releases, in terms of new data reports, in terms of new executive orders or legal actions or acts of Congress that impact what we do in international education, decisions by the State Department or Homeland Security to change their way of handling international students and scholars. And then also we have a Solution Central section, which is important because we need that in this day and age when we're constantly bombarded with new challenges, it seems almost every week, every month at least, that impact what we do and our ability to successfully recruit and enroll and graduate international students. And the final section we have is a global roundup that covers what's happening in other major destination markets, because that perspective is always very important to keep in mind when we're doing our daily work, and oftentimes don't have time in our day to look up from the massive challenges we're facing on our own campuses to be able to see what's happening in other parts of the world that are impacted in different ways by their governments and changes in policies positively and negatively. So as we do each week, those newsletter stories generate, in my mind, 2 or 3 questions every week that we can then address here on Wednesday. And Wednesday gives us a chance to go next level, kind of giving you our applications for what these news stories might be about and how we can adjust what we do in international education to help our institutions to reach more students, to improve what we do in our field. So the first question that we're going to cover today is one that is particularly near and dear to my heart. And any of you who've known me for more than a minute and have read my 6 Ps to Strategic International Enrollment Management, a book chapter that was in Entry Points to U.S. Education about 2 years ago, that's been a real core of my consulting business, and as I've worked in multiple campuses, certainly the last 2 at UNLV and now currently at the University of Akron, am implementing pieces of that strategy, of those 6 Ps, into how we approach international student enrollment management at my universities. So for me, the first question is, are we living where our future students live? This comes out of a couple different things. One, knowing your audience, one of the first rules in marketing, and two is living where your audience lives. And first, you have to know your audience to know where they spend their time. And when I say live where they live, it means, do you have a presence where your future students and audiences that you're going after are spending their time? Everybody's got a website. Everybody needs to keep their content there alive and fresh and hopefully responsive to the kinds of questions that students are asking. But the real question, this question is based on, is do you have a physical presence in digital space where your students are spending their time? We all know that students live on their mobile phones now. We all know that social media is an important part of how they consume information, and where we got the scary suggestions last year that TikTok is now fast becoming one of the largest ways, most significant ways that international students are doing their initial searches about colleges. That is also being transitioned into using AI tools to do their college search, and that means how students are getting information about us is coming through diffuse sources that may not be always accurate, particularly if they're third-party sources that aren't our own websites, and that's something we need to guard against, or at least be aware of how we're being portrayed out in the wider world. But knowing that you need to have a presence where they are, on the kinds of apps that they're using, the messaging apps in particular, are you able to communicate with them through those tools as opposed to email? Email has its place, but in terms of attracting attention, in terms of continuing conversations, the website and email don't really give you the best ways to interact with your prospective student audiences. So I'll be posting a few links to stories that came out this past week. First up is meet students where they are, be the future students choose. And this is an interesting piece coming out of Language Magazine that it talks about the increasingly competitive student-driven era where students have more choices, more information and pathways than any generation before them. We now know, and the data supports it from numerous student surveys, that international students that are seeking an education outside their home country are now considering multiple destinations. It's no longer, I'm only going to apply to the US, I'm only going to apply to the UK, Canada, Australia. They're applying to multiple destinations, not only within the Big Four, but potentially other destinations that might be safety schools or lower cost options or closer to home options or some combination of those that families have become more eager to explore than perhaps they did pre-pandemic. And part of that is the impact of the pandemic economically on families' ability to have as much money available to support international students. But the other part of it is, frankly, the Big Four have all experienced government restrictions on international students. So whether it be increased visa fees, increased thresholds that students have to meet in order to get admission letters and documents and eventually visas, to the students from certain countries or parts of the world being able to come into your country, to certain levels of study where they might want to bring their family, that being outlawed for certain levels of study in certain countries like the UK. We've seen it in the US. Obviously, the travel bans imposed on 39, 40 countries around the world where international students can no longer come if they're not already in the United States to study here. We also see government restrictions that are talking about limiting our students' ability to stay in the country as long as they're maintaining their student status successfully. So many different obstacles in the US and abroad that make the Big Four certainly less attractive, more restrictive, but open the door to other more regional focused institutions that for students in East Asia may be looking at Hong Kong, maybe looking at China, maybe looking at Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore for destinations for their studies. We see East Asian countries like Taiwan, like Japan, like Korea, who are facing increasingly older workforces and a declining number of high school graduates or college graduates that can fill skills gaps in the economy, you see government policies aligning to work with institutions to bring more international students in who can then have an easier pathway through to work after they finish their studies. There are countries in Europe that also are facing skills gaps in their workforce and are using international education as a way to supplement those through paths to work and migration. So all of these are competing variables that are impacting most countries' abilities to recruit that might have been superpowers previously are now becoming one of many, perhaps the big 14 now that are 100,000 or more international students studying inside their borders. This first article, as I mentioned, talks about students' expectations. Currently, we know, and they have been for a while, students are digital first. They're community-driven and highly informed. They live in a world of peer recommendations, as the author says, creator content, short-form video, messaging platforms, and real-time feedback. How many of us are purpose-built to be in those areas, to have messaging platforms a part of your content, to have short form videos and testimonials that are peer recommendations that can really provide real-time feedback for prospective students? How many of us are doing that? So that's the first piece of this article that really makes a lot of sense for me to highlight for us as we go through what we do in international education. There are many of these kinds of articles out there, and this one is certainly no exception. A second piece is talking about websites. Why do university websites drive international students away? This is in a Times Higher Ed, Inside Higher Ed article that came out this past week during NAFSA, and really takes a focus on the journey to university. The university journey, I should say, begins not on campus but online, and what that means. And there's a series of recommendations that students that are being made. Stop looking back. This makes the point that many university websites tend to celebrate past student accomplishments rather than help future students. Pages are outdated, feeds are hidden, key application information is hard to find. That's almost universally true amongst U.S. colleges. So the question is, they want answers to questions such as, can I apply? How much will it cost? What support is available if I run into visa issues? Those are core messages that we do. Can we say we answer clearly, effectively, and within a couple clicks from your international page, if not on that page itself? The content, the suggestions are that we create country-specific advice landing pages so that maybe geolocate students to information that might be more relevant to their country. Perhaps if they're coming from India and there's a link, there's information on credential evaluations on what we equate grades to, or what the process will be for students from that country. Like we have in India, we will accept 3-year degrees if on two conditions. One, that the institution that a student gets a 3-year degree from, like a BCom, a BBA, is a NAC graded institution of A or better. We also say that if the student's diploma must be a first-class diploma from that institution. Those are the only two ways that we'll accept a 3-year degree from India. Others may have a much broader definition of what they'll accept. But having country-specific information, that will help a student from India find out whether it's realistic for them to apply to your institution sooner rather than later. Fee information, scholarship information, all of that should be readily available on the main parts of the international pages. What are some of the expectations regarding communication? Show the humans. Have some live chats, not just a AI bot. Talk about staff profiles. Talk about responsive messaging that they do, even though they rely on AI, do a lot of their research. Maybe they don't want AI when it comes to having a conversation about those issues that are most important to them. They want to talk to a person, whether that be a staff member, current student, whatever it might be. Live chats can help really get to the meat of what those students are really grappling with. So great piece from THE on what those kinds of concerns are for international students that we all need to hopefully be preemptive about with regard to how we communicate with them. And the other piece about it's all about relationships, building the trust early on in the process, that that it's support that is needed most for these students, and making a good first impression. And there's some really great content in here, so I really recommend checking out this THE article on that piece to see what's happening. But in terms of living where your audiences live and where your students are spending their time, also want to highlight one of the most obvious ones in this day and age, and it's been mentioned in both the previous articles, and that's using messaging apps. WhatsApp is the largest messaging platform in the world. More students are using that, more people are using that in the world, and certainly students are among those. That's how they respond best. Certainly outside of China, you need to have a presence on WhatsApp. You need to be available on WhatsApp if you want to truly maximize your connections, your points of contact with your future students. So how do you do that? There's an upcoming Synorbis webinar, actually was yesterday, June 2nd, sorry about that. But if you registered, you'll certainly get the recording of it. But great conversations from colleagues at Synorbis that have an enterprise solution for multiple messaging apps to reach students, to be able to have a central platform where you can message out to using different messaging apps to different student audiences. So that ties to your CRM. That is all inclusive and encompasses all the points of contact that you want to make sure you have with your future students. So if you're not already doing that, certainly you want to explore that. We're having conversations with our CRM team at Akron this coming week, next week, where we hope to be adding these messaging fields to our instance of Slate, so that we can then begin tracking that information and then maintaining conversations or being able to track conversations with students eventually using these platforms. Next up is last piece on this question, and is that helps our living where our audiences live. It's live, I should say. It's a Keystone Group survey, their largest yet, 67,000 plus students, well over I think 150 countries. Were collected between October 1st of last year and April 30th of this year, and there's a few different takeaways here of what you need to know about student interest, and I'll share those with you in this space right now. First up, students are widening their options. They're not walking away just because that there may be. Had the U.S. on their list before doesn't mean they're giving up on us. It just means they're keeping their options open, just in case the visas go south in a big way, or maybe they get a better offer, or financial situations change in their family. And there also, next piece up, it also talks about the impact of AI, a widening gap between the use of and trust around AI. That students are finding information. Over half say prospective students now use AI or social media as part of their search. They are among the least trusted channels, interestingly enough. By contrast, 72% of prospective students rate university websites as very or extremely trustworthy, compared with just 30% for AI results. So it's good to see some healthy skepticism on the parts of students. That should give us some relief. But certainly not doesn't forgive us the need to be aware of what results on AI might say about us, so that perhaps we can get ahead of those and correct them longer term. And this last piece, it's in Morningstar News, the survey that shares the Keystone results. Students are motivated by long-term value, and that certainly revolves around return on investment and outcomes that your institution provides. And the final piece is that they are built to help higher education institutions navigate an ever-changing market. So this is again part of the Keystone Group. So and what their plans are. So really informative survey results from Keystone, and one I certainly recommend all keeping touch with what's going on that front. So, second question of the day is another one that is near and dear to my heart. It's a very important part of my job at this point in my career at the University of Akron is how do you measure success in international partnerships? And this is a second in a 2-week profile from 2-week story, blog story from my colleague Greg Holtz of University of Central Missouri, soon to be formerly of that institution, has been very engaged in the last 4 or 5 years in international ed and international student recruitment, very willing to try a variety of tools to help him better reach and connect with students, including using current students as ambassadors to reach out, to do live chats, to do social media short form videos for prospective student audiences, to be messaging, to be using AI in helping him manage his data flows and all the different reports that are out there that can be helpful to help plan a path forward. But Greg is also involved on partnerships with UCM, and he's the last 2 pieces of his blog series have been, if you can't measure it, you don't have a partnership strategy. So part 2 really breaks down, and when he talks about partnership strategy, he's mostly not necessarily talking about full institution-wide cooperation on research and exchange and perhaps T&E and other things like that. He's more focused in this regard on 2+2 agreements or pathway programs that you have agreements with particular institutions. So he's got a great set of tools here that I definitely recommend that people check out. Walking through what he sets up as 6 different stages: origin, institution, pathway process, application, admissions, visa, enrollment, as the stages of a productive partnership in terms of who's responsible for that, how are they handled set differently than your typical prospects that are applying on their own or through agencies. How are you handling them differently? So this is his way of kind of walking through what that process looks like, how you can set up some measurable goals in there. So really an important piece of that puzzle, and in terms of what's needed to maintain that relationship as well. Not only visits to each campus so that previous institution can keep up with their graduates on your institution, but you visit their campus, do some sessions for prospective students in the next cohort of students that might be coming from that institution. So very valuable article to be checking out. So if you haven't already subscribed to Greg's Substack, certainly recommend it. There's certainly always some humor as well as some useful nuggets from a newer practitioner in the field who is certainly plugged into what we are all dealing with on the digital side, especially with our future students. Now, last question of the day, and this is more of a wrap-up post-NAFSA feedback, kind of evaluation of the conference itself. I'm going to be putting in a piece from Koala News, one of my increasingly favorite pieces of news sources out there in the IE world, international ed world, and it's based in Australia, but they do quite a bit around the world now. They were at NAFSA as well. The article that they've put out this past week is Global by Design, the End of Fragmented International Education. This is something, if those who were at NAFSA, it was a much smaller conference. I shared that last Wednesday in my live from the expo floor. Certainly a much more intimate group, and it's hard to be intimate with 5,000 plus people from around the world. 100 countries were represented in that mix, so a very diverse mix. Close to half of the attendees were first-timers. Certainly the ones from abroad, I think they had the largest percentage of first-timers. This mirrors what I was feeling. I was, in terms of point of comparison, I was looking at the Denver 2022 conference, the first conference back after COVID that NAFSA held, where it was a much smaller group too, about 5,000 or 5,500 or so. The attendance may have been down, but certainly I think it allowed for a lot more conversations that had greater depth and were more substantive in terms of direction and advice. And a number of colleagues I know who are in transition from jobs, one job to the next, or searching for that next job, ability to spend time with them. It reminded me about how important those relationships are in our business. And that translates for professionals in our field, colleagues who are trying to find the right solutions for their institution that may involve connections with other institutions, but also enrolling the right kinds of students on their campus, ones that will stick, ones that will have funding, ones that can get visas, all of those things that matter. The nuts and bolts are important, but those relationships are equally, if not more important. I was very humbled on Tuesday night of first full day of NAFSA to receive a Lifetime Achievement Award from BMI THE, Times Higher Ed and BMI. That was completely unexpected. Late at night, right before the famous Brazil party. Thankfully, I didn't attend that, but certainly it reminded me of everybody who was in that room. Many of which I've known for years, several of which I traveled around the world with, or visited Education USA colleagues, folks from U.S. institutions I've done tours with, service providers I've either worked with or been employed by. Those relationships are what drives me forward and have always driven me forward. That the people that I've now stand on the shoulders of and have the reputation I have in the field, it's because I had people who helped me in my earliest days. My first international trip, I'm on a bus in Switzerland and Germany, visiting international schools in Lugano, in Zurich, in Frankfurt, and Munich, in Frankfurt, in Hamburg, and going to a massive conference in Council of International Schools, European Council of International Schools in Hamburg in 1994. It's my first conference, international conference. Just blew my mind and how different and how special international educators were. And for me, NAFSA has become that conference every year that is always first on my calendar. It's what I've said before, the most exhilarating but also the most exhausting week. 3.5 full days of receptions, meetings, sessions, partnerships, expo hall walks, and back-to-back meetings. But I think this year was a little bit different because the size wasn't as big. We were able to really spend time getting at the heart of some of those core issues that are plaguing us all. But the title of this article, Global by Design, which was the theme for NAFSA, The End of Fragmented International Ed, is something that I think I certainly tend towards a more unified theory of how we need to approach international education on our campuses. And that includes both inbound and outbound education in terms of exchanges, in terms of philosophies on who we're partnering with, why we're recruiting over in certain countries, diversifying where we're bringing students in, which has been the mantra for the last decade or so. But more importantly now, it's diversifying how we're delivering our courses and where we're delivering our courses. Looking at hybrid and overseas developments through partnerships that can really elevate the audiences that can achieve a degree from your institution. And that's what we're focusing on with a lot of TNE focus. I know other countries have been doing it longer and better, far better than we have in the past. We have in the U.S., but certainly it's out of necessity as well, given the current political climate, but just in terms of survival and diversification of delivery, as well as our points of origin for our students. We want to make sure we're getting our degrees into hands of students who truly want and need it and can benefit from it in their countries. So that's what I think a more unified approach, as this article points out, is really, I think, the future of our field, and one that I certainly will be implementing more fully in consultation with our leadership at the university. I mentioned last week we had our chief brand officer at the University of Akron with us at the conference for a couple days, so she got to experience that. She hadn't had a higher ed position before. She'd worked on the private side in corporate America with and done global marketing, so she understood that part, the need for it, and what some of the mechanisms we need to be implementing are. But she didn't know all the specific pieces of the puzzle that we're dealing with and can and should be leveraging as we conduct outreach with students and universities around the world. So that's all we have for you this week on the Roundup. Thanks again for being a part of the conversation. Looking forward to chatting with you all in the weeks and months to come. Cheers.